Well, it has been almost 6 months now since installing our Webasto gasoline heater. This is the AirTop 2000 STC model, and I promised that I'd do an update and share how it's been going after we've been using it for a while, because it's not something you typically see installed like in a Class C motorhome like ours. Usually you see it in a van or a heavy equipment or semi trucks and that sort of thing. But I wanted to really test it to see if it was adequate to be able to heat up a large motorhome or a Class C motorhome like we have. A lot of folks have been asking about, how much gasoline it uses, how much power it uses, is it reliable long term? And having used it now for a long period of time, I think I'm prepared to answer those questions. And I've also made a few modifications to the setup that I want to share with you as well. So let's take a walk through. I'll show you how we use it on a day-to-day basis, and give you an update. So I installed the heater back in the fall when we were still in Washington, and I wanted to test it for a few months, make sure everything was working properly before we hit the road. The heater has been our primary source of heat. I didn't even have the RV hooked up at all to any kind of shore power during that entire time, and even while at home, the temperature would drop below freezing at times. I'd keep the Webasto running 24/7, but now that we're in the desert, it's still been kind of cold down here at times, even getting down in the 30s at night. So it's still been running constantly to keep us warm through the night and during the day at times when it's been kind of a chilly day. That entire 6-month period, we've been off the grid, and I haven't used the propane heater at all. Even though it's still installed, I wanted to test this whole Webasto heater out before I made the decision to remove the old heater. Now, we've been living in the RV for the past 3 months, 100% off the grid. We're down in Arizona now, and the heater's been able to keep the RV nice and comfortable for us that entire time. And we're really happy with the way that it's been able to heat up the entire RV, but we do make some adjustments during the day just to optimize where we are in the RV and keep that area warmer. So during the day, what we'll do is just set it in the morning to whatever temperature we want, say about 67, 69, even up to 70 degrees, until it warms up, and then the heater thermostat here will actually just shut off and just kind of maintain a nice steady ventilation going on the fan until it needs to kick on again, which sometimes is later in the day or in the evening. At night, we have all the heat going into the back so that it keeps it nice and comfortable at 65, which is what we found to be the most comfortable for us for sleeping. In fact, we used to use an electric blanket all the time to warm up the bed before we get in at night, and maybe kick it on in the middle of the night if we get cold. And it's a DC 12-volt electric blanket. But since using the heater and it's able to keep us warm at night, we haven't had to use the electric blanket at all. In fact, recently I just gave it to a friend of ours who needed it because we just don't use it anymore. Now, one of the things that I thought I would use more on the thermostat here was the timer, to be able to set times when the heater kicks on and kicks off at specific temperatures. But we found that we just haven't used it because it's just so easy just to turn the knob and set the temperature you want, and just press the button, and now the heater kicks on and maintains that temperature. One of the nice features that we have been using is actually the fan function. So it has a fan in it that if you didn't want to actually heat the place, it'll just keep a fan blowing, and you can set the intensity level to be able to just keep some ventilation going inside the coach. And that's been a nice thing to have when you just need a little bit of airflow, or you want to cool the place down, or sometimes it's been like Melissa wants to work out here in the RV, and I've cranked up the fan just to keep some airflow going, and it keeps her cool while she's working out. Now, something I thought that would be good to do would be to place just an air filter, just a standard furnace air filter in front of the intake, which is behind here. Now, this isn't mounted or anything, so I can just take it out. But the intake tube, the air intake, is right here. So I figured, why not just put a little filter here to be able to filter out a lot of the dust and other stuff that floats around here in the RV, and clean up the air a little bit when I'm running the fan or the furnace. And I don't know, it's got to be helping, right? So the funny thing is that I haven't even taken out this drawer or even looked inside here since I installed this and wrapped up this project. But from what I can tell, everything is still in the same place I left it, and it's really anchored in there well, and I haven't smelled anything, or there's been no vapor issues that I could tell. It's really secure, and there's a really good seal between the heater and the outside where all the exhaust and stuff is. But one of the things that I did do is to fully insulate the outtake part, which is where most of the heat of the heater is. The first half really doesn't get hot. It's only like the part where the hot air comes out where the heater actually can warm up. So I ended up just taking all the ducting that goes to this vent and the one on the side. There's a T connector in there, and I fully insulated everything with this heater duct insulation, and that seems to have really been able to keep that heat contained, and it hasn't really been an issue. In fact, I built some little walls and new shelving and stuff inside this cabinet here where the ducting is, to hide everything. And then when the heater's running and just blowing really hot air out of here, you can't even tell that there's anything warm in there. It's still nice and cool. So the insulation seems to be doing a great job and working well. Well, I also made a few changes underneath the RV as well, where the exhaust is and where the combustion intake is, and the fuel pump and filter and that whole fuel line part of the system. And the first thing was to reorient the fuel pump so that it's pointing slightly up. I had it mounted horizontal, and I should have put it up a little bit at more of an angle, because the instructions actually say 15 to 45 degrees is where it should be. So it's at a slight angle now. And the other thing that I did was to mount it on kind of a cushioned, a little shock mount that I created out of this is foam packing material. And the reason I did that was because when it was running, I could notice a ticking sound. It's like a knock, knock, like a thump, 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 thump sound when the fuel pump was pumping, and I could hear that here inside the RV, and I figured I wouldn't be able to sleep with that knocking sound all the time. So this is a common issue that you hear about these heaters, is that the fuel pump is a little bit noisy. So what I ended up doing is just using that foam material to create a shock mount, and actually screw the foam material mount to the piece of wood instead of having it directly on that clamp, and the whole pump itself being directly connected to the piece of wood, and that is directly connected to the frame of the RV. So having that direct connection between the fuel pump and the frame was causing that ticking or that knocking feeling and sound to be transferred inside the RV. So with it on that foam piece now, it doesn't make hardly any noise at all here inside. In fact, after I installed it, I didn't think the pump was actually working because I couldn't hear it. But if I really, really listen hard, I can hear it pumping, and for the most part though, I don't hear it at all, and it just blows air, and that's all you hear. I also ended up replacing the fuel filter as well, because after a couple weeks, the one that I had, it actually cracked, and I actually paid more money for that one, but it cracked, and then you know, I had to swap it out with another one, actually a less expensive one, and it worked just fine. But since then it's been fine. But I picked up a spare now that I keep with me here in the RV, just in case the fuel filter needs to be replaced. And those may be a little bit difficult to find, so I put a link down below in the description where you can get a lot of parts for the Webasto too, so go check that out. Now the final thing I did was to wrap the entire exhaust line in the fiberglass header wrap, the exhaust wrap material, and I did that all the way from where it exits the floor here on the other side all the way to the muffler. Now because it's a longer exhaust run, I really haven't had any issues with performance on the heater because it's a longer exhaust than it came with. So, you know, wrapping that, I also sprayed it with that black heat resistant silicone spray, and it looks really good. I also painted the muffler black with that stuff, as well as a little tailpipe that comes out the muffler. So it runs cool. I can actually grab the exhaust line and hold it. It's not too hot to touch. And it performs really well, and it looks pretty good. It's not like this shiny thing sticking out the side of the RV. So in terms of fuel consumption and battery consumption, it's been really efficient. In fact, when it was cold, so when we were back in Washington and it was primarily trying to keep the RV warm when it's in the 30s or, you know, around 40 degrees. Occasionally it would dip below freezing, but the heater was working a little bit harder to warm up the RV when we're back in Washington. And I tried to take some measurements of the fuel consumption during that period, and what I found was in that cooler weather, it would draw only about a gallon or a gallon and a half of fuel from the fuel tank in a 24-hour period. That's pretty much along the lines of what was advertised, and that seemed to be pretty accurate. Now that we're in a warmer climate, I haven't been able to really measure it because we're just living and using the heater primarily during the night. It's got to be using a lot less gas now that we primarily only use it at night to keep it at about that 65-degree temperature, and then in the morning maybe to warm it up a little bit, but then it shuts off. Now the battery consumption is also really minimal because I monitor it regularly on our battery monitor here, and when the heater is first firing up, so when it's just starting up, that combustion process, there's a glow plug inside that fires that up, and when that's running for the first few minutes or so, it draws maybe a maximum of 5 to 6 amps, but that's only for a few minutes, and then it drops down quickly to about 2 amps when it's blowing heat to heat up the space, and it's like 2 to 2.5 amps. But then as it starts to reach that target temperature, it drops to maybe like an amp and a half or 1 amp, and you know, which is really minimal. And then when it's just blowing air and circulating the fan, it's about half an amp or less. So really efficient, and like I said, I regularly monitor it, and it's been pretty consistent throughout the whole time we've been using the heater. Well, in terms of reliability, you know, what can I say? The system's been working flawlessly for the last 6 months, and that has been running 24/7 constantly during that time. And you know, I have no problem leaving it on when we're gone, just letting the thermostat control the temperature in the RV, and felt pretty safe and secure doing that. And I've done that many times, and there hasn't been an issue. I'm definitely going to be removing the old LP heater now that I've confirmed that this Webasto heater is the right setup for us. So I can't really speak to comparing this Webasto against those inexpensive diesel heaters that you can get for $100, $200. I just don't know, because I haven't used one of those for a long time like I have this one. The additional money has been worth the investment because it's totally been a game changer for us. Gives us peace of mind knowing that it's that it's safe, that it's, you know, it keeps the place warm. It's not going to be causing problems or be something that I have to worry about. It's totally changed this whole experience of boondocking and being off-grid while, you know, not having to worry about the LP heater drawing stuff or, you know, just those fluctuations in heat. We're really happy with this setup, but be sure to go watch the install video of this whole system if you haven't already, and I'll link to that below. If you want to see more videos like this, please make sure you're subscribed and give it a thumbs up if you got something out of this. Until then, keep warm, and I'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.